Rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, good morning, everyone. This time we will move to item number 2, audits in progress.
Working on internal audit of the port's travel expenses.
1 second, Mr. Duke.
Pretty much finished preparing the report for the port's travel expenses.
Wait, is your mic on?
It's your mic, Mr.
Hold on.
Wait, Randy, hold on a minute.
Okay.
You want to do this and I'll do that today?
No.
Okay.
Which one?
I don't know.
Press it again.
See.
Okay, try
Mr. Duke,
again.
press your... Okay, you should be on.
Testing? Okay, good. In reference to that audit, the port's travel expenses, it's a work in progress. And you want me to take a look at B and C? Yeah, in reference to B, the port's contracts, that has not been started. Should hopefully start that next month. The follow-up audits have been basically completed. I just have a couple of more items to complete on that, and those should go out this month. The follow-up audit for the ferries, as well as the mileage and expense reimbursement audit, those should go out this month.
So these are the workings that you have in progress now?
Yes, all of those audits are in progress, and they're all looking like they should be going out fairly soon, within the next 2 months for sure.
Okay.
Except for maybe the contracts and agreements. I think that's going to take a little bit more time. Because I'm doing 100% on the contracts and the CEAs, so I'm looking at 100% rather than just a sample.
Okay. Anybody have any questions on the audits that are in progress at this time?
Maybe a question. I understand that, Mr. Duke.
Wait, you want the mic?
Yes, ma'am.
Right, I got you on.
Mr. Duke, I understand that the audits that you indicated here on the agenda is in progress, but could you just give us an update in regards to the port's travel? Do you anticipate any? Are you foreseeing any?
Yes, I do. I just don't want to. I don't think that would be appropriate for me to go through those comments until I discuss that with management, the port's management. But there are some issues that I'm taking a close look at.
Okay, I can appreciate that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any further comments on any items under item 2? Hearing none, we'll move to item 3.
Yeah, I'm trying to.
Results of audit activities, review of the Civil Service Audit Final Report.
All right.
Okay, I finally have this coming up. Okay, this is going to be a review of my civil service internal audit. The audit objectives, first of all, I looked at the classified employee hiring process, whether it was effective in choosing qualified candidates for the position. I looked at the employee hiring process, whether or not it was performed in accordance with the rules and regulations.
Before we move further, is there any way to make the screen whole with each slide?
Make it.
Double click on your slide that you're on.
Okay, is that good?
Would you get to the bottom? The bottom, where the bottom right, all the way at the bottom right.
Right here.
Go a little over to the first icon. No, other side first.
Yeah, I think I might, just to try to make it a little bit bigger, I can't. Nope, that makes it smaller. Can't seem to,
How big is it's gonna get?
can't seem to make it bigger. Oh, good.
There you go.
Oh, good, thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, so I think I left off with the objectives. And what I'm doing is take a look at the hiring process, if it's in accordance with the rules and regulations, the civil service rules, as well as the Louisiana State Constitution. Is the hiring process choosing the qualified candidates for the positions? And can we make recommendations to improve the Civil Service Department's operations and controls? And did I notice any type of fraud, waste, and abuse? Okay, the first observation was the employee hiring process. Got to keep in mind that this is a sample. I took a look at 42 employee files. I noted that in a couple of instances, the employees hired did not have the necessary knowledge, training, and experience to perform their job duties as stated in the job description. It should be noted that these employees did meet the minimum training and experience qualifications. However, they did not meet the necessary experience as stated in the essential job function under specific duties and responsibilities in the job description. My recommendation is during the interviews, candidates could and should be tested to help ensure that they have the necessary experience to fulfill these responsibilities. Management's response, the director states that 2 employees referred to did meet the minimum qualifications posted at the time they applied for the position. Since that time, the Chief Internal Audit job description has been updated. The appointing authority should review the job descriptions for the minimum qualifications before posting the advertisement to ensure updates are not needed. Observation number 2, Rule 8 on working tests. The criteria under Civil Service Commission Rule 8, Working Test Section 1.1, allows for the discretion between the director or the appointing authority. Such discretion shall not be used to discriminate, otherwise base decision-making on illegal criteria. Every person appointed to a position in a classified position by certification from an original employment list or an employee list shall serve at least 6 months working test period. At any time after the first 2 months of the working test period, the appointing authority may remove that person from service based on 2 criteria. The working test indicates that the employee is unable to perform the duties of the position in a satisfactory manner, or the working test indicates that the employee habits or lack of dependability do not merit the employee's continued service. I noted that out of the 42 employee files at these two instances, the working test was not implemented in a timely manner. My recommendation is the appointing authority and employee supervisor should work together, closely monitor probationary employees. The supervisor, since the supervisor works with the employee on a daily basis, the appointing authority should make every effort to support the supervisor's evaluation unless the supervisor cannot provide adequate documentation to support it. If it's determined by the appointing authority and the supervisor that the probationary employee is not performing as they or he or she should, the Civil Service Rule 8 Working Test Section 1.1 should be implemented in a timely manner. In addition, it appears that training and employee evaluations would be helpful to management. Management's response. The director states that in these 2 instances, the supervisor and the appointing authority did not follow through with progressive discipline or documentation. The director feels that human resources and civil service together should receive funding to hold training, not for just discipline, but interviewing, performance appraisals, as well as payroll, etc. Observation number 3, the defunding of positions and layoffs. This condition is rather lengthy, so I'll just give you a synopsis of it. It involves, and the litigation is still ongoing, so I have to be very careful. But it involves an employee who was originally working in the finance department, transferred over to civil service. She was eventually laid off. After review of this court case, to this point, my recommendation is that we should have better communication between the parish president, council, civil service director, and civil service commission to resolve any misunderstandings and any differences in the interpretations of the civil service commission rules. Every effort should be made to avoid spending taxpayers' funds on attorney fees and court cases. Observation number 3, defunding of positions, layoffs, management response. The director agrees with the recommendation. However, she does state the parish council did not allow Rule 8, Section 2 to reduce personnel, nor did the parish council adhere to Rule 9, Section 1.1.
This response to me is more of a response to justify the position in the court case than to actually reflect the facts of the matter.
I would agree with that.
You talking to the mic, please?
Oh, I would agree with that.
Because we've heard a lot of discussion on this case, and no person shall subsequently be removed from a payroll except in accordance with the rules. Well, it's my understanding that they made the selection of what employee was going to be removed, and I think that was probably also something that should have been looked at as to where that should have been handed to somebody else, knowing that the family member was in consideration.
Yeah, I don't think she's a family member.
Well,
I think she's a friend.
I'll leave it at that.
She was a childhood friend, I believe. But I did mention, too, in my analysis, audit information analysis, that it was rather odd that there was a defunding of positions worksheet, Excel worksheet, that was distributed in, I think it was October of 2015. And the director made the advertisement for this. And this worksheet clearly showed that this position was being defunded. And the director, about in June of 2016, decided to advertise for this position. I just felt like that was a little odd. It didn't have any proof that there was, that she knew about it and she just hurried up and did it. That's kind of like what it looks like, but I just wanted to note that for the committee. That did happen.
Now, I guess my comment was to make a decision between the two individuals that were going to be considered for the defunding of the position was made by the civil service director?
The two individuals?
In other words, when the defunding of the position was made, was it one specific position?
It's one specific position. That's correct.
And then she made that decision?
To advertise it in June. And it looks like the finance department sent out a worksheet on all positions that were going to be defunded because of financial issues with the parish. And that particular position was on that worksheet.
And so she decided to fill it knowing that?
Exactly.
Hurriedly fill it.
Excuse me, ma'am?
Hurriedly fill it. She hurried up and filled.
That's exactly correct. It appears that's what happened. I have no proof of that, so I didn't include it as an observation, but I did include it in my data analysis.
Okay.
See, my question in reference to even observation rule 2 and all, my question to you, Mr. Duke, as an internal auditor, is in your professional opinion, don't you think that human resource and civil service should be operating independently yet collaboratively?
Yes, I do. In fact, I think that in most places, human resources and the civil service department are together. They work together. They're not separate. But that, I guess that makes no difference. But that just seemed like rather odd when I first started doing this, you know, that civil service was not within the human resources department.
But if I'm understanding the operation of the human resource right now, I think human resource man responsibility is the insurance and retirement.
Yes.
And I think civil service is the steward of all of the personnel files
Employee records, yes, ma'am.
and that's the way it should be?
Well, I'm going to get to that in a second. There's a little history about how they got those employee records. And I'll get to that in a later observation. But I did have an issue with how that was done.
Okay. Can proceed.
Next.
Civil Service Director Supervision, in accordance with the Louisiana Constitution, 10, Public Officials and Employees, Part 1, State and Civil Service, Section 6, the Commission, Civil Service Commission, supervises the Civil Service Director. My comment on that is that if there are any differences on how the Civil Service Director is being supervised and the operations of that department, these differences should be quickly discussed and resolved independently with the Civil Service Commission. Management response, the director is stated that she is supervised by the Commission in accordance with the Constitution. The Commission is aware of shortage of manpower and has directed the director to address first things first, including, there's an except there, but I believe she meant including the request that requires immediate attention. Observation number 4, policies and procedures. I noted that they didn't have a manual in place. A manual would be a good thing to have for the department, especially if there's a change in directors anytime soon. It would help the new director to have a roadmap on how the daily operations are done, as well as any new employees. They wouldn't have to go to these rules and regulations to figure out how to run the daily operations of the department. I think that would be a good idea, and management's response says that she agrees with that. The department has procedures to follow, and those are in the service rules, but they do not have a documented manual. I think that would be a good thing for them to consider.
With the explanation of the shortage of manpower, creating a policy is impossible at this time. How long has civil service been in effect here?
Since 1994.
Since 1994, 2004, 14. So we are on 24 years.
Yes.
So over a period of 24 years, they haven't had the ability to create a policy and procedure manual?
That's correct. Observation number 6, timesheets and time cards. The department has a time clock. I just wanted to note that I reviewed the employees' time, approvals, compared the time to the time clock cards, etc. I noted no exceptions. They are tracking and monitoring their employee time in an efficient and effective manner. And what I mean by efficient and effective, let me be very specific with that. Effective to me means that they are doing the right thing. Efficient means that they are doing the right thing most of the time. So that being said, the management response.
Wait, I have a comment. I have a comment on that, Mr. Rousseau.
Pull the mic up.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, one second. Ms. Salvant, you're good.
Yes, my comment to that, and when I read this, I had issues with this because if we recognize and admit to, first of all, admit that we have a mother-in-law and a daughter-in-law, the only 2 employees working in a department, and to say that they're being it's being efficient. And if I show up late to work, I'm the daughter-in-law, show up late to work, have my mother-in-law perhaps, and I'm not saying that my comments is actually, and my suggestion is actually happening, but there's a potential for it to happen. You know, someone can punch another person's card, or someone can cover for the other person. So how can you,
Well, the way that I looked at this was, in Miss Katie Barrios' situation, had I been the director, I certainly wouldn't have hired her. I certainly wouldn't have done that. But the reason it wasn't included in the report is because the director sent out all of this information to the Civil Service Ethics Board, and they approved it, so long as the commission supervised or signed off on her evaluations and timesheets. Now, I understand that they don't supervise her on a daily basis, but in this day and age, a lot of people don't get supervised on a daily basis. A lot of people are virtually supervised by Skype in different places, like that. And so even though I thought that was odd, and I didn't agree with it, and I wouldn't have hired her, and I told her I wouldn't have hired her, it was within the law as stated by the Ethics Commission. And as far as the timesheets and time cards and her evaluations, I reviewed those extensively, and they were approved in accordance with the Ethics Board criteria.
well, I would even appreciate in your comments if those comments would be included in there rather than, because I have real hard time absorbing the amount of your observation is that her office is being ran in an efficient and effective manner, knowing the history of that department.
And I understand that. What we have here is a snapshot of what's going on. There's going to be more audits of this area, another snapshot of what's going on. But this snapshot of those 42 files was classified employees only, and it was just a picture. Now, this picture looks like it's given the Civil Service Department a pass. It's based on the objective view that I had of just that particular picture at that point in time. This is an ongoing process. There's going to be more pictures taken of the Civil Service Department that might or could be a totally different picture. I'm not going to say that I expect it to be a different picture because I don't go into an audit expecting negative things to happen. I go into the audit thinking that everything's okay. This particular snapshot just showed me what was going on at that point in time. That's all it did.
Okay. I'm just...
And bear with me, Audit Committee. We have just started this process. We're in for a ride here with these snapshots. These snapshots are going to be taken as I go along, and there's going to be all kinds of different pictures of what's happening here in Plaquemines Parish. And we're in for a ride. I can tell you that right now.
Okay. I can appreciate that because I was leaning towards saying, based on my observation that I've seen and based on what the recommendation of the Ethics Board, but my recommendation would be that this mother and daughter-in-law situation shouldn't continue or should not be, should not have existed or something like that. You can't change it. You didn't make the decision on it, but to give them in my opinion, a high rating like that, but I understand your point. It's a process. It's an ongoing process.
An ongoing process, and all of this, I can take another look at a different sample tomorrow or the next day if the audit committee wants that. And as I said before, I don't think I would have never have done that. I would have never hired my sister-in-law. I would have never hired no matter how qualified they are. If I knew somebody from childhood, my kindergarten or first grade classmate that I've grown up with, I would never hire that person because the appearance of it is improper, no matter what the ethics board says. It's improper.
Okay.
And I'd like for that to be on the record.
Right. I would too.
And for the record, though, at the time that she was hired, she wasn't the daughter-in-law.
That's exactly correct. And that happens all over the place. I can tell you a situation with my wife working at Lisco and Lewis, where she was working there. Her sister, was working there before she was. Was working there before she was hired. Well, there was something between her and us, but the management allowed it to happen because the time frame, similar to this time frame, didn't cause any real ethical issues. They thought.
Right.
So they let my wife and her sister work together, which is normally against their policy.
In addition to all what's just been said, it's the policy in this government to just, moving folks up the ladder just because of tenure. As you mentioned in a previous observation, if you're not qualified for the position, I don't care how long you've been there, it just doesn't automatic. You don't just automatic move into succeed a higher position just because you've been there. You have to go through the process, and the process should be open to the general public.
Yes, ma'am. Totally agreement. Observation number 7, the internal auditor's job description. I took a look at this job description, and in my opinion, they should have internal audit. They should have a person that, like myself, should have internal auditing environment background, at least 5 or 8 years, to be able to do this job. And I know that the job description was updated to include to require a certified public accountant or a certified internal auditor or a Juris Doctor designation. But unless you have environmental experience in internal auditing, this is a totally different animal, and it's very difficult to understand how this type of work works. So I'd recommend 5 to 8 years of experience in the internal auditing environment. Donations of sick leave. This is a very large condition, but I just want to mention that this revolves around the State of Louisiana Department of Justice 1994 opinion, Attorney General's opinion 94-530, that states that donations should be notarized and that all leave and sick leave should be exhausted before the donation is approved and goes into effect. This was not being done. The management response is that she sent an inquiry, she checked with New Orleans, with the different places, and they are not having theirs notarized. So far that she has also sent an email to the attorney for the State of Civil Service. At this point in time, I've gotten no information in regards to that. She also says that this is something that could be addressed in a rule change.
So on this matter, we have Attorney General's opinions that state certain requirements should be done, but nobody's following them?
That's correct, sir. And it could be the cost benefit of it maybe is not there, or maybe it takes too much time to get a notary to sign it, but the attorney's opinion is very clear, and that he states that it really should be done. That was in 1994. I couldn't find a more current one, though. It might behoove me to send an email or a letter to the legislative auditors and see if they have any updated information. I'll check on that.
So getting to the heart of the matter, though, in previous administrations, I know that when you discuss the exhausting of sick leave and annual leave before a donation is allowed, that policy has internally changed from administration to administration, I would assume. And currently, that is the policy that is being followed now, to where they're not exhausting sick leave in time?
Yes, sir.
And so...
Yeah, it looks like if you don't exhaust your sick leave, like in Katie Barrios' case, when she started taking her donations, she had something like 435 hours of sick and annual leave before she started taking her donations. And then if you include the 150 hours of donations, they gave her, over 500 of hours. So and at the end of the day, when she came back, I believe she had some hours left over. So you really can't tell those hours that were left over. You can't tell the identity of those hours. You can't tell if those were the sick leave that she came on board with, or that she left with, or if it was the donated sick leave. So it's like, it's commingled. So.
And who approves that?
It's the director approves that.
The Director of Civil Service?
Yes, sir.
Approve her own donation?
Yes. It's in the rule book. And that's something that could be addressed by ordinance, I guess.
Thank you. Yeah, let me get John.
A lot of these rules, I would think, need to be taken a look at.
Okay, we have Mr. Juneau.
Yes, you're saying that you shouldn't take the extra sick leave until yours is completely exhausted. Am I
That's correct,
complete?
sir.
Then how many can you take?
I don't think there's a limit on how
There's
many.
not a limit?
I haven't seen any rule that says how much you can take as far as donations of sick or annual leave. I didn't see any rule there.
But the main thing is that you should exhaust all your sick leave before you take it.
Absolutely, and it really makes sense that you would do that
Right.
before the donation would be approved. It doesn't make any sense to commingle your donation with, you're supposed to be sick, in that instance. So normally when you're sick, you have taken all your sick leave, all your annual leave, and at that point in time, somebody says, hey, look, I'm going to donate 100 hours to you so that you can have some more doctors visits.
So if you
and
take it
some more help.
before, it's fraud.
It's I'm not going to say fraud, but you have to have intent to deceive. Maybe it is.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, as Mr. Roussel alluded to, this situation has turned into an abusive situation. Over the years, it has changed from administration to administration, But the problem with this is that it's poor supervision of this program. And I've known in the past that because I'm in favor of the way it initially started, I've been working for this government for over 30 plus years, and I've seen the changes. And I remember when you would donate and direct your hours to whom you wanted to direct your hours to, which I thought was a good policy. And then as time went on, you were being told to put it in a pool. You put it in a pool, and then the discretion was civil service direct to whom it goes to. And that was issues again, because they were directing your time, your money, because you convert time into money. Your money was being given to friends and family members, and other people had to fight to get in. I remember when they had a committee that was made a hand-picked committee. They just went down the hall and they handpicked people to sit on the committee and say, okay, you can go and you have the authority to say where this donated hours are going to go at. And there was folks that were being denied hours. So I think this is something that we really need to be looking at.
Yes, ma'am. I think the intent of donating sick or annual leave was not for the employee to make a profit.
Right.
Mr. Warren.
Yes, Warren Lawrence. I guess, be sitting here, and as a former civil service employee of another agency and everything, I just felt compelled if I could make a comment on this. In civil service, and I worked for the Sewage and Water Board, and our policy was at that time you had to exhaust all your sick leave and annual leave before you could get a donation, and the donation had to be directed by the person donating. It could not go in. I never heard of the pool or anything like this, and and we had problems in the past trying to correct it because it was direct fraud. Is what they were doing was, in a case we had, was an engineer who exhausted his sick leave and annual leave, was buying leave from laborers. So the laborer was donating his sick leave at a rate of maybe, $10 an hour, and the engineer was making $35 an hour, but you got a one-for-one basis on your donation, which really makes no sense. And it's something that we fought over a long time. It probably has changed since I left 20 years ago, but it was as a department head, I had it directly signed off on anyone in my department for a donation of sick leave. It was my responsibility to make sure that sick leave was donated, and the amount of sick leave was donated was limited to what was needed for the cause. And then it had to be going to the executive director to be approved after I approved it. If I rejected it for some reason, maybe on the case of when I rejected it with the engineer and the laborers, you know, they had 4 laborers come in and donated each 100 days of sick leave. Well, this engineer was going to make out like a bandit, and that's what it was not intended for. And I rejected it, went to the director. He overruled me and approved it. But neither be the case. I think it's something that if this is going on in this parish, it's a easy way to abuse the system. It has a good intent to it. But I also always looked at the basis of the dollar value of what you donated. That laborer may have to donate 4 days for 1 day of an engineer to get the same value, because it's actually a money transfer. So it was just a comment I felt I had to make to you.
And I appreciate the comment, because it makes me reflect on what has happened in the past. My recollection is that the Director of Administration used to manage this.
That's correct.
And that individual was holding people accountable to making sure that they were utilizing all of their hours. And he would even manage it to the point where he would only approve so many hours. And if those were exhausted, then he would come back, he could make a second approval. Now, I don't know where we got off the track to where someone else is managing that, but I would like to know what in depth what the procedure is. If there's no policy in written, then we could possibly pass something to correct it, to make sure that we are doing, as Mr. Lawrence stated, doing value for value, dollar for dollar, and as well as managing the hours to be able to make sure that it's not abused. So it's something that we need to look into a little deeper, in my opinion.
And if I could add one more point, too, is one thing we did do was that when a person was donated sick leave or annual leave, whatever it was donated, at that time they started accumulating sick leave and annual leave. And they had to use their own accumulation before you could still go in to use what was donated. So you couldn't be building up your pot while you were riding on the other one. So, you know, it's when you look at it from the standpoint, if you're receiving 2 days a month sick leave and you're on somebody else's tab, you're building up your own sick leave while you're using someone else's. So it's something to look at, that you can't accumulate any while you're building. You must use yours in the process of accumulation.
Well, I can almost tell you, but I don't want to go into where it started. I know exactly where it started and whose administration it started under.
Okay, well.
Because you should have that right. If I have accumulated hours, that's my hours.
That's correct.
And if I want to direct it to Warren Lawrence, that's where it should go, to Warren Lawrence. But I know.
Oh, absolutely.
An administration came in, and as Benny just said, right, the director, and they decided that it was going to go into a pool.
I never heard of that.
And they authorized who was going to get what.
Jesus.
Yeah, and that's why we got off track.
Well, let me make it clear. It wasn't my administration.
Oh, well, no, I never heard of that system.
But I can tell you it happened because my previous boss and I sat through a human resource grievance with a young lady. She was the courier of this parish and had surgery on her leg, and she needed, and a gentleman quit the job previously, and he directed her money, his hours, to her, and it did not happen. They refused it. They refused to give it to her because it had to go in the pool, and they had to allocate it the way they wanted. No, but Mr. Roussel, I can tell you, no, it didn't happen under your administration, but it happened.
Well,
30 years I don't have this gray hair on my head for nothing.
Is it happening under the current administration?
I would say it is.
So the point is, Mr. Duke, we have some concerns on this issue, and we'd like some recommendations and some discussion down the line on how we can fix this to make it equitable across the board.
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Observation number 10, custody of employee assets. During this audit, I noted that civil service has custody of all employee records. What not able to find is any type of authorization memo showing that these records were actually authorized to be housed in that department. I would suggest that Plaquemines Parish, the CEO, it's been my experience that the Chief Executive Officer has a fiduciary responsibility to safeguard all assets, including employee records, and that he should or could make some sort of authorization if he wants those records to be housed in civil service or human resources or maybe someone else. And in addition, the history behind how they got to civil service was way back in 1994 when civil service originated, or before civil service originated. These records were housed in the administrative department of Plaquemines Parish. After 1994, when civil service became in existence, for some reason, all of those records were transferred to civil service at that time in 1994. And I believe the director of civil service does state in her response, and I'll read that to you. She says that this is contrary to the rule. She doesn't really think that the CEO has the power to put the records where he wants to, and that's her opinion. But she says, contrary to rule, she says Rule 9, Section 1.8 states, each employee's service rating shall be retained in the files maintained by Civil Service Department. So she's abiding by that rule.
Now, let's clear this up. That is a civil service rule, but that rule can be changed.
That's correct. All the rules in civil service now, I understand, that can be changed by ordinance, including the approval of donations. We can let, depending on a ordinance, finance department could approve donations. The finance department could have custody of the employee records. Human resources could have custody of the records. But we need some sort of authorization either from the council via ordinance or from the chief executive officer.
But it seems to me that the human resources department, in the discussions that I've had here in the last 3.5 years, have been that they are providing a function, but a lot of their record keeping and functioning is over the Civil Service Department, which should be in Human Resources Department.
Correct.
And so, I mean, right now we have one department driving the train, so to speak, when Human Resources is the caboose, and should be.
Yeah, a lot of these rules, they are rules, and they have to be abided by because they're civil service rules. However, it's my understanding that these rules can be discussed and changed via an ordinance. And I think we should do that. We should have a committee look at all these rules.
Okay.
You're absolutely correct, because the current situation that we're operating under is not working. It's definitely not working for the employees, nor is it working for this government. So a change has to take place.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Bartholomew?
John Bartholomew, 15425 Highway 15, Praiseway, Louisiana, zip 70040. I am in concurrence with the idea that we need to modify and change the policy, the responsibility of civil service to enact the inequities that they have of not being able to compile the data in the process that need to be done. Where human resource has the knowledge and has the access and dealing with personnel alike, they need to absorb most of that responsibility through human resources. And that way, through us as a government entity, to this committee, can look into see how far that can go in changing the responsibilities of civil service to human resource. And I know that would improve a whole lot of services when it comes down to employees. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next one is staffing requirements. Currently, I noted that they have one director and one administrative assistant working in the department. I also stated in my audit information section of the report that in order to see whether or not her complaints are valid, I would have to go in and do a performance audit to see exactly what they do, what specific areas she is talking about where she needs an additional compensation officer. That should be done at some point down the road. She states that in accordance with Rule 13, appropriations, B states that's under cities, each city, subject to Part A, made adequate in appropriation to enable the Civil Service Commission and Department to implement that part, meaning staffing, in an efficiently and effective manner. The observation number 12, I believe that the position of the Assistant Internal Auditor should have at least 2 to 4 years of internal auditing experience in the environment and at least a certified internal auditor certification. Management response, she understands that the Chief Internal Auditor would prefer the Assistant Internal Auditor have professional auditing experience and remove the accounting experience. I agree with her. The Assistant Internal Auditor met the minimum qualifications that were posted at the time to be certified for the classification. I agree with her. The minimum qualifications, however, can be addressed and updated before a new advertisement to fill that position is vacated. The objectives of this audit I'll review with you, and let me just reiterate this. I'm taking snapshots. I'm trying to... Oh.
1 second.
Yes, sir.
While we're discussing this, in these positions, in a broad text, do we hire people to train them on the job?
No, I don't believe we do, sir.
So
not in the internal audit environment, we do not. It's never been in my experience.
Okay.
The internal audit...
Mr. Duke, if I may, and I don't think in the departments such as the auditor's office that we should be training someone. We should bring someone in qualified the day they walk through the door. But at the same token, we are not going to begin targeting certain departments and allowing it to exist in other departments because, you know, this uncle, sister, brother, cousin, friend policy is happening throughout the government. So we need to target, not say target, we need to take a close look at all of these integral departments, such as human resource, civil service. You know, folks just moving up the ladder. I mean, they start coming in as a clerk, and within 10 years, they've received a substantial raise. They've gone from $20-some thousand to making $50-some thousand in 10 years. Unheard of. Unheard of, just because who you are and you know someone and you move up the ladder. So we need to be fair with this because what we're doing in the final analysis is we're shortchanging this government. We're shortchanging this government. If we would have had an individual such as yourself years ago, it would have saved us a whole bunch of headaches and we would be that much further down the road. But we need to get all of this favoritism out of government. And this is what's going on here. From president to president, we just have it. You know, civil service, okay, that's supposed to be protecting the employees, but it's really not. It's not. It's only on paper. So, you know, I want just equitable throughout, equality throughout the government, where everybody is being treated fairly and have the opportunity at a job based on the qualifications.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much for those statements.
Yes, and I agree with those statements that we need to, and, you know, I say we need to, it's kind of limited to the administration really needs to, because it's their responsibility to hire people and to pick the right candidate. And it's, you know, imperative that the administration picks the best qualified candidate for the position so that the people that are paying the salaries, which is the public, get the best person for the position, as Ms. Salvant said. And it is starting to look like, you know, we're not really engaging in the best qualified position in some instances.
Yeah, and I would like to mention one thing as well. I've been, you know, the use of public funds, and this, you know, the positions, you know, salaries, the way we, expend our money, the expenditures, everything is public funds. And if you take a look at the Cabela Act, which basically states that every penny that government spends, we have to get an equivalent value for it, or you can't, or it's not. It's in violation of Article 7, Section 14 of the Constitution, and it can appear that it's gratuitous and it's a donation. So that's one thing that all of us have to be aware of, and that's something that I need to go after with a vengeance. Is every dime that's spent here? I need to ask myself that question. Is Plaquemines Parish getting equivalent value for these funds? If they're not, that needs to be reported to the committee every time.
Very good.
Thank you.
Okay, and so that's basically it. Let me just go all the way down here. Okay, my conclusions, and let me just reiterate the fact here that there's going to be many, many snapshots as we venture on this road together, where I'm going to take a lot of pictures of what's going on. This is not the only picture I'm going to take of civil service by a long shot. At this point in time, within this sample, except for the items noted, the hiring process looked effective. Except as noted in this report, it appears that the Commission is following their own civil service rules. Items 1 through 13 can improve the operations of civil service. At this point in time, within this scope, I did not find fraud, waste, or abuse of taxpayers' funds. Civil Service Commission, as an independent body, should meet with the parish president and council to discuss and resolve any misunderstandings concerning the operation of the department and interpretation of the rules. Every effort should be made to avoid spending taxpayers' funds on attorney fees and cases. Classified employees should be hired based on their knowledge and ability to fulfill their positions. The employee's appointing authority and the employee supervisors should closely monitor their employees. If they are not performing as they should, we should implement Working Test Section 1.1 in a timely manner. I thank the Audit Committee for listening to this presentation. I appreciate y'all's help as well.
All right. Do we have any further comments or discussion on the civil service audit as presented by the internal audit? We have no other comments. We'll move to item 4.
Approval of the minutes from the April 12, 2018 meeting.
I'll make a motion.
Councilman Juneau moves to adopt
Second.
the minutes. Councilman Salvant moves. And the machine is open on the adoption of the minutes. And the minutes are adopted unanimously 3-0. Having no further business to come before the Audit Committee, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Councilman Salvant moves. I'll second. And the machine is open on adjournment. And the meeting is adjourned at 10:27. Thank you all for coming. I like to keep the meetings at about an hour, which we have done. So with that said, we'll see you next time.